Welcome back to the most accurate podcast here at 444 Football. As always, I'm your host, John Daigle, joined today, friend in life, already updating all the projections behind the scenes at 444.com, none other than John Paulson. John, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. We're at the camp opening, and things are starting to hit. News is starting to hit, so we're adjusting the rankings on a daily basis now, sometimes multiple times daily, and getting into it, the meat of the fantasy season.
Our personal lives have all ended, and that's why we will be doing a half PPR mock draft today. But to do that, Paulson, we need another friend to help us out. And who better than 1/3 of the #1 fantasy football podcast on the Apple charts. And the man who, I don't know if you remember, Jason, but actually is responsible for taking my Twitter photo. He, of course, is Jason Moore of the Fantasy Footballers.
Yes. It's good times. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Of course. Paulson, you don't know the story, but at an FSGA many, many years ago that we're all too old to remember now, Jason actually asked me why I don't have my face as a photo. And I told him because I don't have photos. I don't take them. So he literally took my phone. We were at the bar together. He took my phone, said, stand over there. He just pointed at the table, and he actually took that photo. So, Jason, we all appreciate you or hate you, honestly, depending what you think of my face.
To be fair, the photo turned out awesome. You look great. I mean, you're so handsome. So you're welcome.
To another bearded person, I would say you are handsome.
Aww.
But we're not here to compliment one another. We are here to do this mock draft together. So I say we get started. 12-team league, half PPR. And the best way to do this is for all of us to take our spots in different segments of the draft. That way we can explain strategies there. I will be picking from the 102, not the 101, because that's too easy. You, Jason, will be picking from 1-6 in the middle, and then Paulson, you have the responsibility at 112 overall. So I say we jump in and get started.
Sounds good. And I would just like to mention that, offline, you said that Jason was your favorite fantasy footballer. I wonder how Andy and Mike feel about that. I like Andy because of the Suns and 4 thing. I just wanted to mention that.
I feel like if the Suns won, I wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be allowed to actually have the invite, but your Bucks took us down. So
yeah,
that'll live on forever. And because the Suns will never win a championship, it will last forever.
The Hitman and I see eye to eye in terms of sneakers. But Jason is my energy. He's my spirit animal.
Okay, sounds good. I just want to clarify that.
All the love for the great Andy Holloway, of course, as well. Jamar Chase starts at team 1. No big deal. I have Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, and Tyreek Hill all in the same tier. Whomever you want to pick first, go for it, even though Justin Jefferson's my 101. In this case, since he falls to 2, just in case it happens in your home league, I will go ahead and take Justin Jefferson and turn off my sound because that's going to get annoying. What are your thoughts, Jason? What has been your strategy so far from the middle of drafts, in particular the first round?
The middle of drafts, I think, is a tough spot. That's where a lot of people are going Travis Kelce. I don't like, personally, the value of a middle first-round tight end that's 34. I know he's awesome. I'd rather get Andrews later. But, yeah, in the middle, my strategy is pretty much it's usually Eckler or Tyreek Hill. I agree with you. I think Tyreek is in that same tier as those great wide receivers, and it depends on the league, right? This has 2 flex in the one we're doing, so I think wide receivers will be a little bit more important.
Half PPR as well. Paulson, what have been your thoughts so far in the middle of drafts?
Yeah, it sort of goes back to your overall draft strategy. Do you want to go with a hero RB approach? Maybe you take a Bijan or an Eckler. The receivers, like Tyreek Hill worries me a little bit with the suspension, not necessarily looming, but a possibility for him. So I'm on the clock now. Did you want to talk about Saquon Barkley while I make my pick here?
Yes, because team 8 here, Saquon Barkley, we obviously know now he's going to be playing on this 1-year deal, incentive-laden contract as well. And so I have seen some initial reactions saying that he should be bumped up back into the end of the first round. His ADP is also already rising so much as that at underdog at the 112, 201 spots. So how are you handling the Barkley news, Paulson?
Well, I bumped up his stats today, but didn't really bump him up too much in the half PPR rankings. I think that in PPR he is jumping up a few spots. Just, I kind of had him missing another half game, sort of expecting him to perhaps hold out. So I think I'm just going to go, since this is half PPR, I'm just going to go with Nick Chubb here.
Jason, what about you and how you're handling Saquon Barkley?
So I had Saquon Barkley when I did all my stats for what for this season. I had him as the running back 3.5 PPR. I was I think very confident in his utilization. He has the backfield to himself. The fact that he signed that extra contract and now we know he's going to be there. I'm back in on him, and on Underdog, you were getting him at a big discount for a couple weeks here.
For a while there, those that attack week 17 were easily getting Cooper Kupp in the top 4 picks, and then Saquon Barkley was falling all the way back to him at the end of the second round to make that little stack. Paulson, you started at 112, Nick Chubb and Stephon Diggs. Is that a strategy you think people should be taking in their home leagues, starting with an anchor running back, for example, instead of wide receiver?
Yeah, I did this for this particular mock just to see. I like to pick one running back, one receiver, just so I have options at the next turn. When you're picking at the end like this, you're kind of at the mercy of the rest of the draft, and you don't have so many picks between your picks that you might be screwed if you were to go 2 receivers here or 2 running backs here. You may not have the depth on the board at your next turn. Frankly, I'm just trying to keep up with this mock. I mean, these guys are picking so fast, these robots. I think we are going to get replaced by AI here before too long.
AI is coming for us all, whether we like it or not. A.J. Brown goes after you take Stephon Diggs, Paulson, Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Patrick Mahomes, the first quarterback in the mid-second, Derrick Henry then, and then it falls to you, Jason, in the middle to get your first receiver with Garrett Wilson. Do you have Garrett Wilson ranked over that group that went beforehand, or is he just the best player left on the board for you?
No, I would have gone the same order that the ADP went. For me, when I was on the board, I took Eckler in the first round, and I kind of like Paulson here. I really like having one running back, one wide receiver in a format like this, and half PPR to start gives me more flexibility in the third. I was considering Josh Jacobs. I think he's going to have an excellent year as well, but with Eckler in the first, Garrett Wilson, he's one of those rare guys left that has overall number 1 wide receiver capabilities.
Also from the chat, Jason, do you have a particular spot that you would take if you got to choose? I would think 101 has the highest equity, but if it's another spot, please let us know.
Yeah, it's the 104 because to me I don't really care. I don't see a huge gap between Christian McCaffrey, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson. To me, they are all willing and able to be the best pick. So I don't mind taking the leftover 4th option there and then having a better pick in the second.
So from the 102, my argument against Christian McCaffrey is not against the player. It is what is happening in drafts right now for those just diving back into home league redraft formats. And that is, if you pass on Christian McCaffrey, instead get one of those elite wide receivers at the top of drafts, what comes back to you then is usually some group of Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, Breece Hall, Ramondre Stevenson, all who I personally have in the same tier. And so that's the reason I'm passing on McCaffrey, is because I think I can get an RB1 in the second or third round as well. And in this case, I will be going Tony Pollard as my RB1. As the board at 101 goes Jalen Hurts, Ramondre Stevenson, leaving Breece Hall and Chris Olave as the next players on my board. Mark Andrews, if we were doing a full PPR, but again, just a half PPR, I'm actually going to click Breece Hall here and probably target receivers coming back to me. What about you, Jason? What do you think about that crop of running backs that right now are being left over at that second, third round turn?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. The wide receivers this season have flown up the boards. The ADPs all have them going higher than what we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years. So it does push a lot of the quality running backs to that 2-3 turn. I don't have those guys in the same tier as Christian McCaffrey personally,
Mhm.
but it's still really good. If you look at the wide receivers that are available at the 2-3 turn versus the running backs, right now, the way that the ADP lies, I tend to agree that the running backs are a little stronger there.
And I don't know if you're going to take him here, but I do know you are very high personally on Jahmyr Gibbs.
I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is a great talent. I love any incoming rookie that's got, top 15 draft capital. Where I'm at right now is pretty much an automatic Mark Andrews pick for me if he is available when it's my turn to pick. I brought it up earlier when I said that in the first round, that 106, that's usually the Travis Kelce zone, and I prefer the value of a Mark Andrews in the third and grabbing an Austin Eckler versus, right now, if I were to switch and go Kelce and Najee Harris or Jahmyr Gibbs, I prefer having it with a better running back.
Mark Andrews did also average an increased 11.8 half PPR points per game in the 11 full games he played with Lamar Jackson. So he was the tight end too. And as we know, Kelce, only the 9th tight end since 2008 to average over 14.5 points per game. Historical anomaly that usually doesn't happen. Paulson, it's back to you now with the RB1, wide receiver 1, and Chubb and Diggs starts. What are you thinking at the back?
Yeah, I mean, surprised to see Gibbs still on the board here. I think he is a strong pick here as I'm trying to – I want to curse whoever set this up because I'm immediately on the board for 2 picks while Jason gets to wax nostalgic about how he's going to take Mark Andrews when he's on. So I'll go ahead and take Jahmyr Gibbs here. I think he's a very solid pick. Burrow went. I'm doing old school today, guys. I got the piece of paper, so
that is old school.
That is. I was going to test out some software as well, but we are. So I've got Gibbs. I think you see a little bit of a drop off. I think at some of these other positions, Olave went. So I think it's a good time to perhaps take a quarterback here with Lamar Jackson still on the board.
Lamar Jackson, of course, so you cannot complete your stack, Jason. Paulson, do you have Gibbs ranked over Etienne, Najee, and Ken Walker? Is that a stance you'd be willing to take in redraft leagues?
What were the Walker and who else?
Gibbs alongside Etienne, Najee Harris, and Ken Walker. How are you handling that?
I've got him ahead of those guys. I think Najee is sort of there due to the workload, but definitely ahead of Etienne.
It's now back to you, Jason. Poached with your stack, but you do have running back, wide receiver, tight end. What is your next thought here?
Yeah, I mean, I was really hoping that Joe Mixon made it to me, and I was thrilled that Paulson took Lamar Jackson. I think that is a solid pick. I would have been forced to take him if he got to me. To complete the stack, I think the value in the 4th is great, but I hate when I get both onesie positions. If I were to spend 2 top 4 picks on tight end and quarterback, I'm just going to be so weak. So right now I'm looking, I can go running back or wide receiver. I like Aaron Jones. I like Miles Sanders. But for me, having kind of the hero RB with Eckler in the first, I'm going to lean towards wide receiver. I like Terry McLaurin a lot this year. I believe that he is a little undervalued right now in ADP. I would have preferred Keenan Allen dropping to me. He got close, but I'll take Terry McLaurin here.
Paulson, I know you two are very high on McLaurin this year.
Yeah, I just released a video on my Instagram, 444_John. Follow me over there.
Trying to get the kids to follow you.
Yeah, he's going off the board, wide receiver 23. I think I have him ranked wide receiver 15 or 16. So this is where he should be going, in my opinion, in the middle of the 4th round. Do you guys? I mean, I wanted to ask you this question too because I sort of took Lamar Jackson because I saw a little bit of a drop off at receiver and at running back. Is that something that you guys would do if there's still an elite quarterback on the board with? I mean, Jackson has QB1 upside. Is that a pick that you guys would make based on the tiers that are sort of left at the other positions?
Yeah, for me, I think Lamar Jackson is a really, really good value because he has the ability of the Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts and those crazy mobile quarterbacks, but you're not getting them in the second round. So there's a few quarterbacks I target where I feel like tier-wise there's a huge drop-off. It's Lamar Jackson, and then a little bit later, I still think Herbert has huge potential. He just had a down year last year when he was playing without his wide receivers and broken ribs.
Herbert, Fields, Lamar Jackson, I have them all pretty much side by side, but I don't hate nitpicking between the three. In this case, I'm curious to get your thoughts, Jason, because is there a particular player or spot you think the RB dead zone hits? Because I agree with you. I like Joe Mixon and Jahmyr Gibbs quite a bit, but when we get to ETN, Najee Harris, Ken Walker, player who are very dependent on touches, that's when I think really I start shying away from running backs for a handful of rounds.
Yeah, I mean, the running back dead zone shifts every year, and this year I think it's been pushed down a little bit because of the wide receivers going earlier, but it's not about the round. It's about, the players. Are you drafting talented players with workload who's going to catch the ball, just what everybody wants, or are you going, I need a running back because I don't have one, and so I guess I'll take this guy who I need. And that's usually the mistake. Take talent.
Speaking of taking talent, I'm eyeing a double tap at wide receiver here, especially with 2 flex spots, 2 starting wide receivers. Again, we are in this spot and range of running backs with J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders, Dameon Pierce, Cam Akers, Alexander Madison, if you want to push them up in rankings on the board. Not a position I'm comfortable with for running back. So parsing through the wide receivers, all who are the same guys, in my opinion, I will go Jerry Jeudy and Christian Watson and cross my fingers. Any thoughts on Christian Watson this year, Jason? Because I do think he's much more volatile than people are giving him credit for, though the ceiling is obviously sexy.
Yeah, he's a player where I think every single analyst has had great thoughts and terrible thoughts. Complete wild card. I have landed on betting on the talent. I believe he is really, really talented. He is a hyper athlete, better than than all the great NFL athletes. You saw that on a per touch basis last year when he went to the Senior Bowl. He absolutely dominated, and I think that when he's had the opportunities, he's done great stuff with it. So you bet on what you see
from the middle of the draft in this kind of format with 2 flex spots. Are you allowing the board to come to you, or do you think there's a specific strategy you want people to be targeting, like flexing wide receivers, flexing running backs?
No, in the middle of the draft, it really is let the board come to you. You stay water. I could see myself starting with 3 running backs, starting with 3 wide receivers, pivoting, just depending on who's on the board. I've done so many drafts from the middle where they turn out just wildly different. It's just a matter of who falls to you. Earlier I said you bet on talent. In this range, I want talented wide receivers, usually over running backs, but Miles Sanders fell to me, and I am actually really high on Miles Sanders this year. I believe, it's if you've seen the video of Miles Sanders, head coach, the general manager, all talking about his work in the receiving game, how important that is, getting him to 50 catches. Like I think he will be involved in the receiving game. The depth chart there, the money they gave him, and he's a talented guy with, I believe, a good offensive line. So I don't love the fact that he's got a rookie quarterback, but Miles Sanders, when I finished my stats, I was like, oh my gosh, I have Miles Sanders way too high. So I've moved him down a little bit, but I do believe in him.
I do agree with you because, as you mentioned, it was GM, coach, running backs coach, and even Miles Sanders himself, who all said we are trying to get him involved in the passing game as a 3-down back this year. He's the one player in that dead zone range where I do worry that maybe the volume is too much, like a Najee Harris, and thus he's a terrific bet on ADP. It's back to you, Paulson. We bided enough time for you to gather your thoughts so you weren't scrambling to Instagram for followers. So what are you doing at the back here now?
Yeah, I got sniped by Team 11. I wanted Kittle here, but I'll take his teammate Brandon Ayuk. I was kind of looking at my roster. I've got 2 running backs, one receiver, and a quarterback coming into this turn. And I do like a good tight end, but and there is a bit of a drop off here after Goddard and Waller. So I'm just confirming who I have higher. I have Waller a bit higher, so I'm going to go ahead and nab him here with the 6-1 pick.
After Travis Kelce, since he's the most obvious pick, Paulson, how are you handling that next couple of tiers of tight ends? What do you suggest people do, in particular at the back of drafts with them?
Yeah, so it sort of depends on if you're in a tight end premium league. Things get bumped up, but in a regular half PPR or full PPR format, I think Jason had hit the nail on the head. Mark Andrews in the 3rd round is a really nice value, and I did notice in my other charity draft over at Data Force that TJ Hawkinson slipped really far as well. So those are 2 really good values if you want to forego Kelce in the 1st round. I think you can get some really good value on either Andrews in the middle of the 3rd. In this draft, Hawkinson slipped to 5-12, which I think is really good value there, given his 8.6 targets per game that he saw after coming over to the Vikings. But I do want one of these better, at least top 6 type tight ends, and I think Waller has a chance if he can stay healthy. Which is the big question with him. He's probably going to lead this team, the Giants, in targets, and you could see him finishing top 3 pretty easily if he plays 15, 16 games.
For those listening to the podcast, Mike Williams, DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, Brandon Ayuk, and Michael Pittman off the board next among wide receivers, and you take it upon yourself, Jason, to then draft Tyler Lockett as your first flex option. I want to hear you talk about Lockett because all Paulson and I have done all offseason are tell everyone to get higher on Lockett.
Then we are in agreement. I had to stop. I had to make a rule, for myself in Underdog, that I'm not allowed to draft Tyler Lockett anymore because my exposure was it was just, if an injury happens, I had him everywhere. I don't understand how he could be drafted where he's been a top 15 wide receiver forever. He's talented. He's in the same system. JSN comes in, and all of a sudden, Tyler Lockett is just completely discounted. Tyler Lockett is awesome. So I'm happy, thrilled to get him in the 6. And also, when I look at the quarterback situation, I played the weighted out game, and I feel like all the quarterbacks that I really love, they're all gone. I was hoping Trevor Lawrence made it back to me. So at this point, there's a few guys that I like. I would go after Tua in a couple rounds here, but Geno is kind of my fallback option super late, so maybe I'll have that little Geno Lockett stack.
And everyone thinks because of his profile that Metcalf is the one who ends worlds and it wins your week for you. But quietly, Lockett and Metcalf have played 32 games together the last 2 seasons, and it's Lockett who has 5 top 5 finishes in that span. Metcalf only has 1 when he's playing with Lockett. Lockett actually has the higher ceiling than Metcalf as well, despite the way he's consistently treated year over year in fantasy football. Go ahead, Paulson.
I was just going to say that, listening to Jason and looking at his team, I think he and I need to co-own a high stakes team at some point because we're really the Ayuk Lockett pick was really tough for me. I have those 2 tied in my rankings. I think Ayuk is ahead by a fraction of a point. So that was a tough decision. I was sort of hoping that Lockett might be back, make it back to 7-12, but that's kind of a pipe dream. Just given that these picks are taken by ADP, and you also have smart people picking 6 and 2. But he's Andrews in the 3rd, or Eckler in the 1st, Andrews in the 3rd, McLaurin in the 4th, Miles Sanders, I think. Just to comment on Jason's 5th round pick is that they want to get him involved as a receiver, and he did catch a lot of passes as a rookie. He could be a bell cow. I think the one concern with Sanders is perhaps durability, but that's kind of a good problem to have if you have a bell cow and you're hoping that he stays healthy. And then I think Lockett coming back is a great pick in the 6th. So this is one of the reasons why I do like to take a running back or 2 early, because you can get guys like McLaurin, Lockett in those middle rounds. I love finding real world number 1 receivers though in the middle rounds, and those guys can explode and have top 10, top 12 seasons.
I feel like I just hit the first fork in the road of the draft and having 4 wide receivers, Deontay Johnson, and then the 101 for those listening goes Cam Akers and Marquise Brown. Thus, I have an opportunity to continue stacking wide receivers for flex options or pivot and go running back. In this case, I go Rashad White over David Montgomery. Those are my 2 highest ranked right here. But I also don't hate if someone were to go even heavier at wide receiver and tack on Jackson Smith and Jigba, Treylon Burks, perhaps Jordan Addison or Jahan Dotson in this range as well. Anyone in that group of wide receivers, Jason, stand out to you?
Yeah, I love Jordan Addison. I think that he's very talented as a wide receiver. Obviously, a Biletnikoff Award winner. But when you are going to a role where Adam Thielen ran the second most routes in the NFL, and you have to guard Justin Jefferson, I just think the opportunity is going to be there for him to have a really good rookie season. So I'm pretty bullish on Addison.
Another question from Drewski here, Paulson. Thoughts on early quarterback? Because what we're seeing, as Jason talked about earlier, is that, yes, the big 3, Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts, all going in the top 30 picks on both Underdog and DraftKings right now. But for redraft leagues, do you think that should remain consistent, or would you change that approach?
I think that what we're seeing is that the quarterback is becoming a more important fantasy position, and it's not as easy to find good, solid QB1 numbers in the later rounds. And some of these quarterbacks are so prolific with the rushing and the throwing of the football that they're able to carry teams to wins in in any given week. So I think there's tiers, and I think it's kind of set up the right way right now with Hurts, Allen, and Mahomes. You really can't go wrong with those 3. Then you have, Jackson, Burrow, and Fields. Jackson and Fields have that amazing upside. Burrow just feels like a really safe QB5, QB4 every year. And then you have, I think, Herbert and Lawrence, the next 2 that went in our draft here. And Herbert with, we talked about a little bit earlier, but Kellen Moore coming in as offensive coordinator, I think that helps him quite a bit. Lawrence was really solid. But then after you get, past Lawrence, it starts to get a little dicier. So then you might want to wait and grab a Geno Smith or Daniel Jones type later on in the draft.
Does being higher on that next tier, Jason, of the Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Justin Fields, what we talked about, does that make you then avoid paying the tax on those big 3? Or if they fall to the right range, do you still not mind taking them?
Yeah, I don't grab them in the second round. If I can do a stack late in the third, where they're, if they drop there, I am willing to do that. But I think it's a mistake right now because, we always think everything's going to happen like it happened last year, and it never does. If what happened last year happens again this year, then they're great picks. Those 3 guys lapped the field, and they are worth being drafted in the second round. The problem is, if they don't lap the field, you're drafting them at their ceiling. They have to be great, and not only do they have to be great, but Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields and all those other players have to not be great, because otherwise, only one team's going to win the championship. And if you can get a great quarterback in the 5th round and pair him up with a great running back in the second or wide receiver in the second, your team's just going to be better, even though Josh Allen will be great.
And right now, I do not have a quarterback at the 102 yet, but a couple sleepers I still have in mind that I think will fall. Paulson, you tacked on Gabriel Davis and Alvin Kamara at the end. So your thoughts on those players?
Yeah, I was looking at Pickens and Dotson there with Gabe Davis. I still believe in Gabe Davis. I think he, had that ankle injury. He planned to play through that. It was a funny stat. He's got 17 touchdowns in his last 24 games. Mm-hmm. They often come in bunches, but that's still a nice player to have, a nice value to have, even as your wide receiver 3, or wide receiver 4, which is, I have a wide receiver 3. And I think Dotson has a lot of upside as well. He did very well last year with McLaurin and some sketchy quarterback play there in Washington. showed some good route running ability as well. Pickens is interesting with Kenny Pickett entering his second season. Not the greatest separator, but he's a monster in the contested catch. Could be a real big factor in the red zone if Pickett can figure out how to throw touchdowns. And then for my second pick, I was kind of debating this, but Kamara, we're kind of bracing for a suspension. I think it'll be 4 games or thereabouts, and so he could be at the 8-1 pick, a game changer for me if he comes back and his usual self, a big factor in that Saints running and passing game. So I think he's worth the risk there. On a per game basis, he would be ranked higher in the rankings.
And after Alvin Kamara goes at the back to you, the next running back to come off the board is to you, Jason, with Antonio Gibson. Some people may think that Brian Robinson is the number 1 running back there, but your thoughts on Gibson and taking him ahead of Robinson?
Oh yeah, I won't have Robinson on my teams, and I will have plenty of Antonio Gibson. I believe that Antonio Gibson's going to be in the J.D. McKissic role. He's a great receiver. I want the pass catching. This is a guy who he's been a top 12 fantasy running back 2 times already. He's really talented, and with McKissic out of the way, I think he'll get enough work in the receiving game to be a good value. When I took David Montgomery the last round, it was because there was a handful of wide receivers that I really liked, Jordan Addison, Jahan Dotson, Treylon Burks, Gabe Davis, and they all went. So I felt like where I was on the clock, I'm not huge into Michael Thomas right now. I mean, maybe that could work. I just don't like betting on guys who haven't done it in a long time that are old. So I went Antonio Gibson.
It comes back to me, and I take a stand on one of my favorite mid-round tight ends, Pat Freiermuth, over Evan Ingram and David Njoku. Just talking about the target tree there with Pittsburgh. Freiermuth only played 7 full games with Kenny Pickett last year, as both were in and out of the lineup. But in those 7 full games, Freiermuth was still second on the team in targets, 19.9% target share behind Deontay Johnson's 22.5%. And again, it's a passing offense we expect to regress. Since last year, all of them should have scored more touchdowns based on historical anomalies. Evan Ingram then goes off the board. Zach Charbonnet up next. And then I will round it out here, being ahead on Samaje Perine. Yes, the Javonte Williams news. Let's actually, Jason, what do you think about the Javonte Williams news now that he is reported to camp and they're reportedly easing him back in to training camp right now?
It's really crazy to me. I've been completely out on Javonte the entire offseason based on the specifics of his injury. But the fact that he didn't go on PUP, it's so easy to put anyone on PUP. They could take him off whenever they want. And if he stays off the PUP and keeps working, it reminds me a lot of last year being out on Chris Godwin and saying his injury, his timeline, maybe he'll be back by November. And then they didn't place him on the PUP to start training camp. And you went, really? You just don't believe it. And I still don't believe it. I'm very skeptical, but I'm going to be paying attention because if he never gets placed on there, maybe he's just a fast healer, and obviously he's talented. But I have been more on the Perine side and less on the Javonte side for the entirety of the offseason up till like 2 days ago.
What did you do with the projections, Paulson, following the Javonte news?
Yeah, he moved up. We had some positive news in the OTAs where he was out on the field and doing some work. And so I think at that point I bumped him up a couple spots. And then this news last week or this week that he was not on PUP at all, I did bump him up another few spots. So he's, I think, at RB20 now. Intriguing player. I do think that Sean Payton, maybe the thing that's kind of going under discussed is that Sean Payton has never really had a bell cow back, or he typically likes to split stuff. So I think Perine will have value. Certainly early in the season, Javonte and Perine are likely to split the work. But I think by end of September, Williams probably is in a lead back role, and maybe you kind of look at him like Perine's probably more the better pass catcher. So you could look at him as the Kamara, but I think skill-wise and talent-wise, Javonte's probably more the Kamara and Perine more the Ingram. I think their passing, rushing roles are going to be reversed a little bit from what we saw in New Orleans.
Is there any wide receiver you would have taken over a running back in my position, Paulson. Michael Thomas was still on the board, as Jason talked about, Zay Flowers, and the next up, just in terms of ADP, are Cortland Sutton, Rashad Bateman, Jamison Williams, and Elijah Moore.
Yeah, I think Michael Thomas is intriguing, and I get Jason's being leery of him, and guys that haven't played in a while that are old, but getting a guy of his talent in the 9th round, and even last year when he did play, he was very productive. So it's worth the risk, I think, at that point in the draft, getting a player of that caliber. Even if it doesn't pan out, it's probably a better play than some of these younger receivers that just aren't proven at all. So I might have taken Thomas there. I did take him, I believe, in Scott Fishbowl. He's an intriguing player at that point in the draft.
It comes back to you, Jason, and you make the decision to draft Anthony Richardson ahead of Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, and Daniel Jones, just to give people that range of players. So your thoughts on Richardson?
Yeah, this is the first time I've drafted Anthony Richardson in any draft. I haven't been very bullish on him, and I see him just like when I'm looking at the players available and the quarterbacks I'm going to end up with. I'm probably going to end up with Geno Smith or an Aaron Rodgers to stack with Tyler Lockett or Garrett Wilson. And so Anthony Richardson to me is in this point of the draft, I'm drafting my backup quarterback. And it's weird to do that before I get my starter, but I think it's a legitimate strategy this season because he's like the only player that I can remember doing this with, where I'll grab a last round quarterback who's probably going to be starting for me week 1, but Anthony Richardson could be a nuclear option, a great fantasy asset that is a league-winning type and style of quarterback should it happen, but I won't leave him alone on this roster.
Are you usually taking one quarterback? That's it, and one quarterback leagues? Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Anthony Richardson is his own thing. It's the only time I could imagine grabbing 2. I guess maybe if you want to take like a last round shot on Kyler, there's very few reasons I would ever draft 2 quarterbacks, but I'm going to do it because I'm crazy. All right, so I'm back on the clock here. I just don't love the wide receivers. My roster needs a wide receiver, but I'm not in love with the options here. So I'm going to just grab guys that I believe in the talent of, and I'm going to take Kendre Miller, rookie running back who, man, did I love his film. If the season starts with Kamara out for a month and if Kendre's healthy and active there, I think he will turn heads and really shock and surprise with how talented he is.
The wide receivers left on the board right now, Elijah Moore, Allen Lazard, Adam Thielen, Jacoby Myers, next up in ADP. That's what you decided to deter from. Quarterbacks remaining, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, and Jared Goff next up. Paulson, speaking of Anthony Richardson, how do you see Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman producing, assuming Anthony Richardson is starting a majority of games for this offense?
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Richardson's kind of a black box. We don't know exactly what this offense is going to look like. We have an idea. Shane Steichen ran the offense in Philly. So my projections really project Richardson for the same type of rushing workload that Hurts had. And just looking at his college stats relative to most NFL rookies, he would run the ball quite a bit, but not that much. But I think bumping up his rushing makes a lot of sense given his passing skill set and what Steichen did with Hurts. So I think he's got a big upside. We just don't know what how good of a thrower he's gonna be. And I think I'm worried about Pittman. I believe in his talent. But the question is, can he see enough volume there to support his ADP, which his ADP is pretty low right now. So, kind of like Michael Thomas, getting a Pittman 7th round. He went 6th round in this draft, but if you get him in the 7th round, late 6th, you're getting a really good player at a certain point in the draft where if he had a quarterback that we were sure about, he'd be going a lot earlier, 3rd round, maybe 4th round.
It comes back to me. Kirk Cousins goes off the board to producer Sal at 105, and Geno Smith, one of probably my favorite mid-round quarterback, I take as my QB1 here. Just the fact that he has 3 wide receivers going in the first 7 rounds. And I tend to prioritize stacking less in simple 12-team leagues. It becomes less of a priority to me. Thus, I think Geno Smith getting that receiver equity is an amazing QB1 here. It's back to you, though, Jason, from the middle.
Yeah, so I'm looking at wide receiver here, and there's a lot of guys I don't like Adam Thielen, who he'll have volume, he'll be the number 1, but he'll be irrelevant. And then there's shots that I could take so much deeper, guys that I like that are much lower in ADP. I prefer younger players, so I'm going to go with a second-year guy who I think will lead the team in targets in Romeo Doubs. Reach down a little bit, and that's the way that I statted him out. I talked about liking Christian Watson. Obviously, going to Jordan Love, we don't know. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he great? But I do believe that Doubs will be the number 1 target in the offense, and so to grab a number 1 target that is young with upside in the 11th round, I'm fine.
Yes.
I'm fine with that.
Speaking of second-year players, what are your thoughts on Kansas City's ongoing situation? Kadarius Toney now out at least until week 1. We don't know beyond that following surgery. So what are you doing with the Chiefs wide receivers now?
Yeah, there's been debate among the 3 of us at the Fantasy Footballers here. I'm on an island. I'm by myself here. That I really like Rashee Rice. That's where I'm putting my bet. Now, I think all of us here are putting the bet that there isn't going to be a dude. There's not going to be one that just emerges and is Tyreek Hill. It's Travis Kelce, and then it's going to be a smattering of other options that, this week it's MVS, this week it's Sky Moore, et cetera. But I like Rashee Rice. I think he's a player that I liked before the NFL draft, and he has an opportunity to do something great. Sky Moore, to me, had the opportunity. He played a lot, and he just didn't hit for me. So the other 2 guys are more on Sky Moore. I'm on Rice.
Rashee Rice also has an advantage because he ran 94% of his routes from the slot in 2021, and then 87% of his routes from the boundary last year. So he has experience and produced at both spots in college. Thus, no matter how they want to use him, if there's an opening on the field in 3 wide sets, he can play at both positions. Whereas I don't even know if Kadarius Toney can be a boundary receiver. I have no idea if he can start in 2 wide sets, but I think Sky Moore can because he played both spots last year. So that's why I think if we're just playing the game of fantasy football, Kadarius Toney was always kind of the odd man out, even though people were taking stances on him 5 rounds earlier than either Sky Moore or Rashee Rice. Your thoughts, Paulson, on the Chiefs wide receivers?
Yeah, I mean, Kadarius Toney, it sounded like he had a scope. I had 2 scopes in college playing basketball, and I was back 3 weeks to a month back playing. So, I think he'll be out there for week 1 pretty easily. If he had similar to what I had, which was just basically torn cartilage, it sounded like they did a cleanup with the scope. The scope's just not very invasive, so it allows you to heal faster. There's not that much damage done to the knee in terms of cutting it open and getting in there. So this is just the issue with Kadarius Toney is that, on a per touch basis, he's amazing. He was really high in yards per route run last season. Previous season with the Giants, he was very high in yards per route run, which is a good indicator of future success. But can he stay healthy? That's the big question. Sky Moore, Jason alluded to it, did get some playing time. It was under 30% though snaps. They have been talking about him as making big strides this year. And, I'm worried that if we, bank on another rookie, that we're just going to get another Sky Moore year. So that's my concern with Rice. So I would lean right now Sky Moore, but, they've got Justin Ross there, and, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is going to play a lot because they spent a lot of money on him. So it's really Kelce or bust at this point. You can get some of these guys later, and they're cheap. They're cheap rolls of the dice, but not a lot of confidence in any of them right now.
We are dealing with thinner benches as well. Just 4 bench spots, a starting kicker and defense. Producer Sal, you're making us draft kickers and defenses. What are we doing here? But I will say for thinner benches, I do want to target upside personally. That's when like players like Rashad White and Christian Watson last year, you want to force your league mates. You want everyone to make hard decisions like that to keep these players, since as we remember, Christian Watson was unusable until week 10. You want to force your benches to make those kind of tough cuts for fun waiver wires. Do you handle it the same way, Jason, for thin benches? Do you target upside?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on a little bit what I did in the draft ahead. Did I draft very volatile players early, and now I kind of want a veteran presence that's just going to get a lot of volume? Then I might go that way. Otherwise, a lot of times with my last pick or two, what I'm trying to find is like a Rashee Rice, someone that you can draft. And if it doesn't work out in the beginning of the season, you just cut him and move on. Week one, you need players to cut because the waiver wire is so hot. So I like taking shots on that type of player where there's a path, and you think you're going to find out week one, and if it doesn't work out, then great, move on.
And I think one of those players, Paulson, was Roschon Johnson, who you took in the back of the last draft. Someone that may have a role. I think he'll be active for special teams. He was a captain on special teams at Texas, but he may not get touches early on. So your thoughts on the Bears backfield and Roschon in particular?
Yeah, that's a weird backfield to sort of gauge. And the more I studied Roschon Johnson, and I love that his Twitter handle is just @Roschon. I mean, that's right there. That's really cool. But really good player, good runner, playing behind Robinson there at Texas. Didn't get, the spotlight shined on him, but he averaged almost as many yards per carry as the generational talent ahead of him. And this is a wide open backfield. Herbert did have some good adjusted or advanced stats. I thought about him at my last turn, Damian Harris, Khalil Herbert. But John, your stats on Harris kind of pushed me towards him in terms of the touchdown upside for Damian Harris. Took Odell Beckham because looking at what's going on with Rashad Bateman, his injury, and being on PUP or whatever it was. I guess he wasn't reporting to the team. Some weirdness there. Beckham's still a good player. Got the stack there with Lamar Jackson. Rondale Moore, I think he's a very undervalued player. Played a lot last year, and when he was healthy, he was very productive. So I like my last 2 turns.
You mentioned you needed receivers, Jason. So you added Romeo Doubs, Rashee Rice, and then this past round, Van Jefferson.
Yeah, Van Jefferson to me is a sleeper right now. The Rams imploded last year. Everything fell apart. Nothing was good. Allen Robinson was on the field too much, et cetera, et cetera. And, another year removed from the injury, Matthew Stafford back. The depth chart says Van Jefferson's going to be on the field. I think he'll actually be a pretty involved wide receiver. He's not necessarily like the super upside type pick we were talking about with these last picks. But it fills out my roster pretty nicely. I said earlier I was planning on getting 2 quarterbacks with Anthony Richardson, but I'm not going to just draft. If Geno came to me, if Aaron Rodgers came to me, Daniel Jones, those types, then that's great. I think there's 6 auto teams that have 2 quarterbacks in this league, so I'll just roll with Anthony Richardson.
1 tight end, 1 quarterback for me as well in these types of leagues, and then we can find ways to stream, know who to cut in between. It comes back to you, Paulson, as we get into the final 2 rounds, 14th and 15th, and we start looking at sleepers and just players everyone need to target in the later rounds. You have Michael Gallup and Gus Edwards added at the end.
Yeah, Gallup, last year coming back with the ACL, he was okay, but I think this is the year where he's getting back to his full speed. 3rd option in that passing game with Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb there. They lost Dalton Schultz. I do like Jake Ferguson as a sleeper there at tight end. But just, kind of a guy in the 13th round that if there's an injury ahead of him could turn in starter numbers. And then Gus Edwards, I'm kind of watching this J.K. Dobbins situation. his, it doesn't sound like his, he's fully healthy. So his knee might still be bothering him. Gus Edwards, obviously a very productive running back whenever he's had the opportunity to carry the ball. So I like him now. I kind of bumped him up my, attrition rankings. The other thing I wanted to mention was that I noticed some, you're looking at the queue and you're looking at the ADP and you're like, wow, it just really got ugly quickly. And I don't know if you guys saw that as well. You're like, oh, I don't know if I like any of these guys. And it was right around the time that, like a Geno Smith would go off the board, or Richardson, or Tua. So it may not be a bad play if you were looking at that same range and kind of like, I don't really like any of these guys, to sort of plan your draft, to draft one or two of those quarterbacks at that point, really load up on the talent at other positions, first through 8th round, and be pretty loaded everywhere else, and then just sort of bank on a couple of quarterbacks late.
And speaking of targeting upside for your benches, Jason, you take Jerome Ford now.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you're just trying to, this is a player you can move on from, but he's second on the depth chart behind Nick Chubb. There's really no other option. So I'm curious how involved he'll be with Kareem Hunt gone, just in general. Like, how much work will he receive? Will he be someone that could even be in a flex? Or is he completely just an insurance policy only and the next man up should Nick Chubb get injured? But, that's just the type of player you're looking for right now.
And the type of player I think also fits the bill here for Chuba Hubbard. So I'm going to tack him on just in case Miles Sanders is not the 3-down option or gets injured. And then as we are looking for deeper wide receivers here, I do like DJ Chark. He goes right before me in best ball. It seems like a weekly headache to figure out when to start and sit DJ Chark in redraft formats. But I am very open in these type of deeper leagues to tack on Jaden Reed as a sleeper option at wide receiver. 203 career receptions in college. And we know being good on special teams, a good returner, translates to the NFL. How you see the field in yards after the catch. And Jaden Reed averaged 20 yards per kick return and 15.5 yards per punt return in college. Also had 18 career carries as a do-it-all type of player. So I really like Jaden Reed just in case the target shares don't shake out for Christian Watson dominating targets from Jordan Love this year. It is. Back to you in the middle, though, Jason.
Yeah, so I'm looking here at a bunch of different options. Usually when I'm in the very last round, what is this, the 15th round, I'm often taking rookies. I'm often taking guys that just we haven't really seen, and maybe there's a surprising breakout. Dwayne McBride has an opportunity. Israel Abanikanda was a player that I really liked his film. He's behind, Breece Hall, who maybe doesn't get back. But I'm going to go a little deeper, a little bit more surprising, just for fun's sake. And I'm going to go with Sean Tucker, undrafted rookie running back who went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a free agent. He had some health issues. I think during the combine it was reported will he ever play again or something like that, and went undrafted. But in the pre-draft process, seemed like a really solid back, and I think that the depth chart he's going to, he can just win it. And it's a 15th round pick, so I'll probably cut him week 1 and replace him on the roster.
That, and he did quietly receive $155,000 guaranteed as an undrafted free agent. I know that doesn't seem like much in terms of NFL contracts, but that's actually a lot more than what usually players make on offense as an undrafted player. So yeah, I think they actually want to give Sean Tucker at least a chance to see what he can do in the preseason and go from there. Paulson, it is your responsibility though to pick Mr. Irrelevant here and cap off the draft.
Yeah, I mentioned Jake Ferguson. That might be a pick that I would make with Waller in a real draft as my tight end. But I just wanted to mention Zamir White. This whole thing with Josh Jacobs smells funny. He seems like he's pretty dug in. I wouldn't be surprised if he missed some games, either via just holding out or perhaps coming back late, getting injured. And Zamir White seems to be the most likely player there to take over the rushing load. I mean, they do have Amir Abdullah, pass catcher, Brandon Bolden, etc. But White seems to be the possible stopgap if Jacobs misses time.
With that being said, Jason, it looks like you have finished your draft with 7 running backs, 6 wide receivers, and then, of course, 1 tight end, 1 quarterback. So anything you would have changed moving along with these players?
Knowing with hindsight, I probably would have grabbed a wide receiver instead of David Montgomery and still grabbed Antonio Gibson later. I might have looked at getting Herbert at quarterback, knowing that half the league is going to double up on quarterbacks here. But overall, I'm pretty happy with my roster.
Paulson, you had the Nick Chubb, Stephon Diggs, Jahmyr Gibbs, Lamar Jackson start. How do you think you fared in this one? Any changes?
I think I probably would stick with my picks. The only thing maybe is Lockett over Ayuk. I'm just kind of debating those 2 players. I think Ayuk, they both have a lot of talent, both great route runners, but Lockett may have a little bit more volume week to week. We do know that Brock Purdy seems to favor Deebo Samuel when all 3 are healthy, and he seems to get the first read. So that's my little worry with Ayuk. But the rest of the roster looks pretty solid. I don't think I'd make any major changes.
And before we get out of here, Paulson and I already did our flag plants, had an episode just a few weeks ago. So, Jason, I need to ask you, who do you think will be your highest roster player in fantasy football this year? Who is your flag plant?
I think it's a player I drafted in the 3rd round. I think it's going to be Mark Andrews. To me, I think there's a legitimate, high odds that he finishes the season as the tight end 1. And if he does, getting him in the 3rd round is a massive, massive discount. So with Todd Monken in town and just the passing volume that I expect to go up in Baltimore, Mark Andrews, basically if I'm in the middle of the 3rd, he's on my roster.
Everyone knows where they can find the fantasy footballers, but just in case they've been living under a rock, Jason, go ahead and tell them where to find the rest of y'all's work.
The internet. I mean,
internet.com.
Just internet.com. You can go anywhere. Just you can go to fantasyfootballers.com. You can go to YouTube. You can go to your podcast app. Wherever you are, we are.
It turns out SEO is great when you put fantasy football in the title. Paulson, what else do you have for everyone on the site?
Starting my 99 stats, but a Mitch Ain't One article, and I've kind of wrapped up my player blurbs. I'll probably do a few more here and there, but big stats article coming out early next week.
And I had a $125 best ball draft. If you want to check that out, 20 rounds that I streamed solo last night, free on the 4-4 YouTube channel. We will be back next week with more news and projections updates and more friends to talk fantasy football. But until then, be a little bit kinder than what's required. We'll see you next time.